Sorry, that's a weirdly big image of myself. Honorable Senator Mutahi Kagwe, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development. Honorable Wycliffe Oparanya, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Cooperatives, MSMEs. Her Excellency, Ms. Katerina Ingoldsby, Ambassador of Ireland to Kenya. Ms. Maren Naylor, Head of Development Cooperation, Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany. Dr. Paul Rono, PS, State Department for Agriculture. Mr. Jonathan Mueke, Principal Secretary, State Department of Livestock. Ms. Mary Muiti, CEO of Council of Governors. Distinguished guests, colleagues, farmer representatives, good morning. Let me first congratulate the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development and the FINAS Secretariat for bringing us together. And for this year's theme, as my very previous speaker very eloquently said, towards a sustainable financial architecture for Africa's food systems. It's an honor and extreme privilege to be one of the opening speakers. Let me begin my keynote with a heroine, because there's no story without a good hero or a heroine. We'll call her Mwende. Mwende farms 2 acres in Makueni, and she grows tomatoes and onions, not for the region or export markets, but for families in Machakos, in Nairobi, and in Mombasa. She grows the food we actually eat. Mwende is a good farmer. Her mother farmed this land, and her grandmother before that. But Mwende is farming a climate her grandmother would not recognize. The rains that came in March now come in April, and sometimes not at all. A season she could once read, she now gambles on. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. When Mwende needs money for a phone, she has it in minutes, digitally. For school fees, there are fintech digital lenders. For a funeral, the chama will rally. But when she needs to put in a drip line before the rains, buy certified seed, or hold her onions in a dry and safe place for 6 weeks until the price recovers, finance that is fit for purpose gets harder to find. We seem to have built a financial system that reaches Mwende for almost everything, and in a timely, customized manner. Everything except the harvest. Everything except the thing that feeds all of us. That is not an accident of markets, it's a set of choices about what we count, what we price, and what we back. That is the other thing about choices. Choices can always be remade. But let me be fair, Mwende's farming is not unfinanced. The input dealer, the sacco, the trader at the gate, the relative who remits money from home, someone backs her every season. Africa's food is definitely financed, just not well enough and just not at scale. Across Africa, agriculture is 1/5 to 2/5 of the GDP and up to 60% of jobs. In Kenya, it contributes to about 22% of our economy directly, and yet it has constantly received less than 5% of bank lending for over a decade and has been stuck there. Now, if you picture that against the background of climate change, the UN's IPCC tells us that since 1961, climate change has cut Africa's agriculture productivity growth by 34%, the worst of any region on Earth. And the World Bank projects that by 2030, which is 4 years from now, climate impacts could push more than 40 million more Africans into poverty. But this is not a story of just risk. It is also a story of opportunity, right here at home. With the National Treasury, IFAD, and FSD Kenya, we recently mapped Kenya's own food deficits, like eggs, milk, fish, honey, the food we import because we do not grow enough of our own. If you look at it differently, there's a lot of demand. That's not necessarily a problem. There is a predetermined market. In every one of these value chains, there are enterprises waiting to be built and jobs waiting to be created. And we need those jobs. The last FinAccess survey by FSD Kenya told us something we cannot ignore. our young people are walking away from farming. So the real question underneath the question is, we will not secure our food if farming holds no future for those meant to inherit it. Here is what this means. We are underfinancing the one sector that feeds us in the very decade that it has become extremely difficult to farm. And the hard part is that it was not even deliberate. When the rules were written, the Basel norms, the prudential norms, Mwende was simply not in the room. She wasn't designed out. She was just never designed for. We in this room have always had the answers. Agriculture needs longer tenors, repayments must follow harvest and not fiscal year calendar quarters. Naming it is not progress. I often tell my team, and many of them will tell you to the point of being annoying, I always ask them, what is the problem we are actually trying to solve? And here's my attempt at today's question. The problem is not what Mwende needs. The question or the problem is, what is it that is stopping the system from delivering it? And that architecture is where I'll spend the rest few minutes. One of the first building blocks that I would like to start with are the rules of the game. Because that's where exclusion is written. When Mwende's loan is restructured because of a drought that she did not cause, prudential rules will call it a bad loan. When her income arrives in 2 lump sums in a year, because that's how farming is, 90-day loan classifications standards make her delinquent. When she has no title, she's the one with no collateral. These were rules written for a salaried employee in Nairobi. And we have quietly shut out the woman who feeds Nairobi. So here is my ask to all of us, and I include FSD Kenya in this, policymakers and all of us in this room. I know it is easier said than done, but we need prudential treatment that gets finance flowing to agriculture without putting the stability of our financial sector at risk. Not a blunt quota, but something more deliberate. The right incentives, the right de-risking mechanisms, steady investments in farm and farmer data with Mwende kept at the center. Let's recognize partial guarantees and crop insurance policy for what they are, real reductions in risk. And the Basel framework has already let us price for that. Let a loan classification follow the harvest, not the calendar. We have examples from India, Brazil, and other countries that have already done this. Accept a warehouse receipt or a forward contract as collateral, so a farmer without a title is not a farmer without a credit. And use public and concessional money for first loss, moving real risk off the balance sheet rather than pretending that it will go away. Done this way, agriculture should be safer to finance. It also protects our financial system. That brings me to the second block, which is data. Underneath all of this, underneath the rules sits a deeper problem. You cannot lend to who or what you cannot see. Mwende's plot, her soil, her rainfall, her repayment record is invisible to multiple financial institutions today. And even when it's visible, is it accurate enough to bet a depositor's money on? So we need shared information infrastructure. Farmer, land, soil data, cooperative records, climate data, data that is recent, it is reliable, it is verifiable, and held as public good, so that an insurer or a lender can build financial products and services on top of it. I'm happy that as Kenya, we've made and are making significant progress in this direction. And there are multiple sessions today in the agenda that will address this topic. However, 20 years of being a market facilitator as FSD Kenya, making financial markets work for the poor, has taught us one important lesson. Innovation is not automatically inclusive. The same digital tools that widen and expand reach can also deepen exclusion. For a farmer without a smartphone, for a farmer without an ID, connectivity, or trust. Judge an innovation by whether it solved a real problem for Mwende and not by its downloads, or how cool it sounds. Technology is a means to an end and not a destination in itself. This now comes to the third layer of the architecture, finance for cash flows of food. Let's design finance for the way food actually moves, and for the climate that it is today moving through. Mwende's resilience is not a single product problem. It's a series and sequences of products and services. She needs savings that she can reach and insurance that she can afford. When you bundle insurance with a loan, evidence shows that a farmer is up to 25 percentage points likely to get credit. And an insured farmer invests more in her land. Insurance is what gives the bank the confidence to lend, and the farmer the confidence to plant. Mwende also needs asset finance for the drip line, the machinery, the cold storage that keeps her tomatoes from spoiling, and her crops to reach the market, where fruit and vegetable losses are traditionally running losses as high as 40 to 50%. None of this works on short, expensive money. It needs patient, long-term blended capital, and it must be genuine adaptation finance, not ordinary credit wearing a green label. But financing Mwende to grow more is only half of it. If her tomatoes rot for want of a buyer or leave the country as raw produce, little changes. The real prize is financing the small processor near her farm gate, where her crop can become something more, where it can become tomato paste, probably even pasta sauce. That's how value stays in the country, and that is where the jobs are. The jobs that make farming something a young person chooses rather than escapes. And through all of this runs the ecological test, perhaps the most important one. For Mwende, restoring her soil is not a green project. It is how she will survive the next dry season. A financial system that funds the harvest while running down the land it grows on has not solved the problem, we have just postponed it. I realize that it's also a little hypocritical of me to talk about what we should all be doing without stating what FSD Kenya would do. For the next 10 years, along with the amazing colleagues from FSD Kenya that you see here today, we're hoping and planning on doubling down on 3 very interconnected bets. One is making credit and information for credit markets work. And this includes working with multiple partners that are present here in modifying the rules, helping put in place informational architecture that allows lenders and insurers to come in and design for Mwende. We've already started that journey with CIS Kenya, Industry Association, bankers, and cooperatives in the room. The second is inclusive finance for sustainable agri-food system. Here, we are working through savings, movable collateral-backed credit, and insurance for risk prevention, risk coping, and risk recovery. An example would be FSD Kenya's livestock insurance work, which began with a handful of pastoralists in Marsabit in 2010, and now reaches more than 350,000 households across 21 counties. And the third would be finance for MSME growth, especially agricultural MSMEs, which can turn Mwende's harvest into value creation. FST Kenya has already kickstarted this journey with the support of UK Aid through our Sustainable Urban Economic Development Program. We provided seed capital to the tune of £10 million to 21 agro-processing companies who have leveraged that to more than 3 times to invest £45 million locally with the aim of creating over 90,000 jobs in the next 5 years. So let me end where I began, with Mwende in Makueni County, looking up at the sky. Mwende needs a financial system built for her reality, against a climate crisis that she did not cause. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next 3 days. Africa's food is being already financed on the thinnest of margins by SACCOs, input dealers, chamas, and the diaspora. We need the formal system, its rules, to catch up with what it already works and to keep Mwende in the room when we do it. I take great pleasure in welcoming all of you to FINAS 2026. My thanks to the Government of Kenya and to the 2 Cabinet Secretaries whose leadership anchors this conversation, to the governments of Ireland and Germany for standing with this agenda, IFAD, AGRA, UNDP, the FINAS Secretariat, and everyone and all partners whose hard work brought us here today. We have the tools, we have the evidence, we know how to remake some of these design choices, and let's work towards building a financial architecture that truly works for Africa's food systems. Thank you.
Excellent. Wow. We must keep Mwende at the very center of our engagements. Well done. Really appreciate that. And that was also reiterated